Okay, my friends, it's bedtime. And I wanted to talk to you all about something that's been going on lately. We've all been seeing it and dealing with it, and it's been going through society for quite some time. And that is how we deal with mourning when we're struggling with the loss of a celebrity or somebody that we didn't know, someone who was in the public sphere, and, how we deal with them. And recently on Medium, I had published an article about how we're dealing with celebrity deaths, like with John Lennon or with David Bowie, who had a profound impact when he passed away on a lot of people. Recently, right, Ozzy Osbourne. And then I even wrote about how we dealt with the Golden Girls, which was really kind of odd because they're a very lasting staple in television and everybody adores them. But when they died, there really wasn't much said about them. There wasn't any candlelight vigils or, a lot of things said in the media. When Betty White died, however, there was a little bit more, but for the rest of them, there was just a mention, and that's kind of sad. And they call that parasocial grief, when we're dealing with people outside of our circle who have passed away and how we deal with it. And I want to look backwards on something that happened a long time ago, and I want to talk to you about the myth of perfection. And it's about the legacy and how we rewrite some of the histories of people that we were very attached to in the public space, right? And it's how we treat the dead, especially the famous. And that says more about us than it says about them, I think, at the end of the day, right? So there's this strange ritual that we've developed, as you know. When a celebrity dies, the first thing we do is we often clean them up, don't we? We'll strip away the messy parts, the contradictions, the failures. We will often cut off the rough edges and leave behind something far more polished than, what we lived with. And that's easier to love and it's easier to sell, but, almost always it's a lie. And this isn't really new behavior. In fact, one of the earliest and most revealing examples of this habit that we have, it happened nearly 200 years ago. And it happened with Ludwig von Beethoven, with Beethoven. And it was a man named Anton Schindler who was his secretary. Schindler was Beethoven's secretary near the end of his life, probably the last 20 years. And after Beethoven died in the early 1800s, I think it was 1827, Schindler had taken it upon himself to become his posthumous mouthpiece, as they say, his keeper of his own legacy. And what followed after that wasn't biography. It was like a myth-building project that he had worked on for some time, and everybody believed. He edited, he destroyed, he forged Beethoven's conversation books. He had rewritten the documents that Beethoven had used to communicate due to his deafness. Schindler rewrote entire sections of all of Beethoven's writings to make Beethoven appear gentler, more noble, and saintly, right? He fabricated full-on letters, whole chunks of the man's personality, and he erased far more, than we knew. And why did he do it? Well, Schindler unfortunately believed that the world wasn't ready to face any truth about Beethoven. And for all of his genius, and he didn't think that people would want to see him as an angry, petty, paranoid, and deeply lonely man. And maybe it was vanity, but either way, the result was a version of Beethoven that felt less like a man and more like a monument, and that's what Schindler left. All right. So for nearly a century, that was the Beethoven that we all inherited. But as time went by, the truth started to leak back out, and the truth was far more human. Beethoven's greatness, it didn't really need to be softened or cleaned up, and his music was never at risk of anything. And if knowing the fires and the contradictions within Beethoven, those things only deepened the experience of what he created. Now, this happens all the time. If you think about the estates of like modern celebrities, you think about the ways they control the stories and shape documentaries, and like Freddie Mercury, right? And they approve the biopics, and some don't. History doesn't need more statues. It only needs truth. And the truth is that greatness and ugliness can live in the same house. Often they usually do, and they do for lifetimes. Beethoven, he didn't need to be perfect to be immortal. He just needed to be real. And, he still is. His music is still with us, and we hear it every time a piano is struck. 1,000 years from now, there's still going to be children sitting at pianos learning Fur Elise and Moonlight Sonata. And, there'll still be, orchestras and concert halls playing his music. Long after a lot of the modern pop like music that we listen to on the daily has, faded away, we'll still have Beethoven. And that's something to think about. And, we can only lose someone like that once. But when you think about it in terms of like David Bowie and Ozzy Osbourne, and then how we feel as a collective whole, you can sense that people have real feelings about these people. And, we now have to worry that, will these people who control the rights of their music and the rights of their image, how's that going to be rewritten? How's that going to be changed over time? And the person that we've seen over the last, say, 30, 40 years, are they in danger in the next 30, 40 years of completely disappearing and being replaced by something else? Possibly. Right? Possibly. Anyways, just food for thought about celebrities and grief, and how well-meaning people often try to change things, and oftentimes not for the better. Be well. Good night.